welcome to episode 16 of the No Bullshit Property Podcast, brought to you by Cert Property.
I'm Howard.
And I'm Paul, and today we'll be talking to Ged McPartlin, the legend. My former partner in crime.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, not really. I didn't realise we're no longer friends.
But before we get started with today's episode, just a quick reminder to check out certproperty.co.uk, where you can find the latest property news, downloadable industry guides, and much more to help you on your investment journey. However, before we start today's conversation, as always, we'll have a quick roundup of what's been going on in the property industry over the last month. Well, I think the biggest thing in the news this week is the decision we're waiting on for HS2 and how that's going to affect Manchester and the northern cities. We're told that a decision is due towards the end of this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's hope it's the right decision and that HS2 gets delivered as planned, because without the northern leg of it seems like a bit of a pointless project, but let's see. I think the other big thing, which is very relevant for our topic today, is the recent article and news put out by Knight Frank about interest in investing in the build-to-rent sector by institutional investors. And like I say, very relevant for our guests and our topic we've got today. So, thank you for joining us, Ged.
Very welcome.
And it'd be really interesting to talk to you today a bit about your journey with
all of it.
Well, juicy bits. With Ascend, obviously one of the forerunners in terms of property management in the build-to-rent sector, and more specifically the suburban build-to-rent sector, which is gaining a lot of momentum at the moment. So really interested to hear your perspectives on that. And anything else you care to talk about?
Okay, we'll give you a brief sort of background on where we're at from a Ascend point of view. We started a traditional buy-to-let agency, got up to a couple of thousand properties pretty quickly. I was a bit of a non-believer in this build-to-rent taking off in the early days, mainly for self-preservation purposes, because we were getting deals ourselves to buy and stuff. So by that, it was probably 5-6 years ago, we pivoted into build-to-rent, and suburban build-to-rent specifically seemed to become our niche. We're very quickly managing a couple of thousand properties in suburban build-to-rent, and I think we look at the figures, and I think there's less than 10,000 units actually currently live, and we're managing about 7,500 of them. So I don't think anyone's seen anything in the space other than what we haven't seen or are seeing currently. Tons of capital about to be deployed in the space, and I think next year, maybe the years beyond that, we'll see that come to fruition. I think there's challenges around sort of cost of money, and people maybe sat on the hands a little bit at the minute and worried about what might happen with interest rates and similar things to what you guys are seeing. So it's an interesting space, and I think the demand is going to continue for the next foreseeable, past my retirement, hopefully.
And why do you think there's been the switch in focus from investors? You've had perspective on it and dealing with investors investing into traditional build to rent. Why has there been the switch to the suburban?
I think I'm surprised it actually took us as long as it did. I mean, when we first got into the build to rent space, we very much found our niche in the suburban sector of it, and everyone was talking multifamily and the high rise stuff in those days. But I think if you look at nearly 80% of the UK property market is housing. So and I think there's then 20% of that of their housing in sort of rented accommodation. So I think as I hate to say the aspiration for younger people to buy sort of started to diminish. Personally, I think that's bullshit. But anyway, unfortunately, I think that's a political issue, not a property issue. So I think the demand is steadily increased, but I think the demand's always been there for good housing. And you guys will know better than me from a city centre point of view, and that multifamily space. That's great up until a period of time in people's lives. I mean, there's only the diehards like Paul that live in town beyond their 40s. Don't know what you're holding on.
I'm still here as well.
I don't know what you're holding on for, but go and set a family up somewhere.
I won't be leaving town anytime soon.
So I think, I was surprised there wasn't more people doing it. We were working with sort of the Sigmas and the Gatehouse of this world, which maybe sort of, pioneered that. I think the challenge with it is it's a real difficult piece to model unless you've got real inside knowledge. And the investors we speak to now, the biggest thing is, how do we model this gross to net, or when the geography is, the length and breadth of the country, and we look at 100 plus sites as far as bloody Perth down to sort of, the Cambridge sort of belt and Bury St Edmunds corridor. So it's a difficult one to be able to price. If you've got 500 units in one block, it's very easy to model that. So I think it's been one that, people have maybe taken a step back, looked at what other people are doing, seen it's working, because, like I said, some of the people we work with, it's very much a model that works. But maybe it's only now people have been willing to take the plunge once they've seen it, it's in fruition, really.
Yeah, I think the challenge when we've looked at suburban build to rent, and it's something that we're keen to deliver, and we've been working on developing our own house types for it that are energy efficient, modular methods of construction, so on, is actually benchmarking rents, because a lot of these suburban locations, you're going into them and there's nothing comparable on the market, and that's a big challenge.
100%. And what we look at now, what we benchmark are build to rent sites next to what the sort of local area is, and it can be anything from 10 to 20% uplift on what a general sort of 2, 3, 4 bedroom house may get. In some of the more juicy locations, like you're around Manchester city centre, I mean, you're 20-25% plus on in some of the local rental market. So it's very, very difficult, and that's what I'd say, that the minimum we build in is when we're pricing a scheme for somebody is, okay, so this is what the market's saying, we're going to add at least 10% onto that, because we know we're going to get it. Then there's the build time, you've got a bit of market movement from that point of view, and yet generally you're 15 to 20% over what really the market's saying your rent should be. But I get the finding the comfort in that is only when you've got the data, and we sort of have the data behind it, because we've proven that to be the case. If you just sat there thinking, I think it should be this, but is it where, as a developer, where do you find the comfort?
Exactly. Well, and then taking that step further, your investors, getting them comfortable as well in a market, like I said before, where the economic environment's a bit more uncertain. So getting someone to believe in, well, you're going to get 10%, 20% more than the local market is a challenge. But as more and more are delivered and prove it, that's where it's going to. And
I think that's it. The data's always been a big thing in build to rent space. And we're probably 4 or 5 years into building some good data pieces, and that's that sort of thing. Whenever we sit in front of a new potential investor, it's almost they want us to model it for them, because we are the agency basically that's got the data. Exactly. So I think we speak to a lot of people with a lot of aspiration, but the aspiration dwindles down to maybe, or then it comes to a nervousness on particularly in the current climate. So it's an interesting one. But I think there's a Knight Frank report recently saying that in the living sector it's going to be 45 billion in the next 5 years, which I don't doubt. And I think someone said 71% of that's going to they're going to increase their sort of suburban. So I think there's plenty of facts and figures out there that says this market's going to grow exponentially. The biggest challenge will be delivery, because there's only a few of the bigger players. You add your countrysides, then they've now merged with Angie, so it then becomes an even smaller pool of developers. And I speak to some guys I know locally to me in South Manchester, sort of trying to get them involved, because I think as the appetite builds, the opportunity to to get involved as a developer will increase. But I think, when we first started dealing with build to rent investors, they wanted tier 1 developers, all they're interested in. Now it's all with tier 2. Now it's like, we'll look at anything. You know what I mean? Does it work? Can they build it? We'll potentially buy it.
Yes.
And I think that will continue because, delivery is going to be a big thing.
Yeah. Well, like I say, it's something that we've been looking at, and over that time period, as we've been looking at it, I think that market shift has happened, and we've got our own sort of concept design, which is something that I think is a bit different because we're taking a lot of what the city centre build to rent offers and taking that out to suburban locations, so communal facilities.
Right, okay. In terms of how do you see that sort of working in terms of communal facilities
having shared communal facilities across the state. So but again, building that has a cost.
Yeah.
And if we're saying, well, suburban build to rent, you'll get a 10%, 20% premium, but if you put those, trust us, you'll get a 30%. It's a lot more difficult to prove that. So
then you've got to go and prove that model.
Exactly. So that is the challenging bit, is delivery of what we think the market wants. Because similar to yourself, we've done a lot of market engagement. We've got a lot of data in terms of feedback from potential tenants. So it's not just us going, we think this will work. We've actually got the data, but still, us saying we've got this data and we'll get you 30% better. Is a challenge.
I guess that's almost sort of like going back to old school days when you used to have sort of a community type centre, and that's what it was. That's what it was built around. And I always thought when we went into housing whether it would eventually sort of develop into that sort of space, because otherwise it does get a bit boring. To be honest, you've got park, you've got local transport, you've got schools. Outside of that, that I always think, people say they're building communities, but are you really building communities? You're building houses for people to live in. And I do think it's an interesting point that you've made. I guess the challenge is always, do you get your return on investment for it? But I think as a build product, I think, for me, I personally think it would work, because I think that's building communities as opposed to building sort of estates for people to live in.
And we're calling it something different. We're calling our concept suburban community living, because what we're trying to build is a community, but the challenge is in the delivery of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, compared to the urban stuff, the property management really is relatively easier. As far as I see it. I mean, we've not had obviously the operational experience yet.
There's nothing easy about property management, by the way.
But from the perspective of comparing it against urban, the block management of an apartment block just instinctively feels a lot more challenging and a lot more difficult than managing a wider estate. Is that a fair assessment?
I would absolutely disagree with that one.
Okay, good.
I think that the challenge you have with and look, I mean, if you're talking about one estate versus one block of apartments, that's very comparable wise, it should be easier to manage the houses. But if you've got 100 sites, or you've got 20, 30, and bear in mind, no investor's going to say, I'm going to buy 500 units in this one local area. No one's done that to date. I don't think anyone's ever going to do it. In the sweet spots, 100 to 125 maybe these days. It used to be 50 to 70. Now that's sort of moved on. So then you've got investors want to deploy decent amount of capital. So if you're spending $1 billion, $2 billion, you're going to have maybe 10, 15 different sites. So then if you all want them under one brand or one piece, how do you manage them effectively? The geography of it is such a challenge. You can, we one thing we had to do, and we spent years and millions of pounds developing our own IT systems, because what you eventually have is, imagine you've got 100 sites and they've all got an inspection going on a day, a check-in, a check-out. To be fair, what we found we had was, we got 2 or 3 people on the same fucking site the same day. You know what I mean? And it's blowing my mind. How does this become the case? But because of the nature of the beast and the size of it, so we had to build some tech that sort of said, to the people booking in equipment, before you do that, do you know XY is going to be there? Book it in that way, and then use sort of the Google API maps to route people's sort of the way they go, and what to drive efficiencies, because you can become so inefficient very quickly. And that's what we were for the first few years. We were like, shit, we've got all this property to manage, and we're doing a great job, and there's no voids, and we're rising rent tenants and stuff. But my God, we make no money in the background. So that's where that's where the tech piece really came into us, into our own. And we had a big IT development team, and still have, and we spent millions and continue to develop it, because it is a challenge, particularly when you're doing a large number of sites.
Yeah.
And how do you think that effective property management from a tenant's point of view is instrumental to the success of suburban build to rent?
Look, I think with everything, and it's just, no matter whether it's property management,
do the tenants expect a higher level of property management?
100% they expect a higher, because they're paying a premium for the property. They expect a premium service. They expect great communication, good customer service, and also they expect, most people just want stuff fixed straight away. You know what I mean? It's not rocket science what we do. Let's face facts. We do a lot of maintenance. We do move-ins, move-outs. And the rest of it, probably looks after itself. But yeah, because we're demanding a premium, and it's coming under certain brands, and the way the brand is perceived to be, we have people, kicking our arse over stuff that maybe, in a residential block in Manchester, or even a property in South Manchester wouldn't have the same level of demands, and that's something you sort of realise pretty quickly, because we were traditionally a buy-to-let estate agency, and you'd offer a good service, but now you need to take this to a whole new level and consistently deliver that, and that is that's a hard task.
And on the other side of it, the landlord side, I'm interested in. Is it, and I think possibly this is what you were getting at before, is it easier dealing with one institution, one landlord, because you can get an answer, you can go get quickly on, resolutions to things?
Easiest question.
Yeah, but does that come with different challenges?
Oh, it becomes with different levels of expectation.
Yeah.
And I think, when managing stuff on scale, you have to set out your KPIs at the start. You have to understand, what you can do within the realms of day-to-day management. And then there's a whole raft of reporting that is just another level, particularly, if we're managing the REIT, that the amount of reporting we do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and you've got to be hitting those KPIs, otherwise you get your arse kicked, and that's just the way it is. But give me one fund with 1,000 properties over 1,000 individual landlords every day of the week. It's just night and day. It's just night and day.
And so what does that mean for your mix now? Obviously you're very invested in the build to rent going forward. Where does that leave you with the traditional buy-to-let agency?
Trying to pinch my buy-to-let stock.
I mean, if it's going.
To be fair, the business is set up in two very different ways. Okay. So we have the buy-to-let team, and we have the build-to-rent team. The crossovers are your accounts function, your credit control function, your property inspection, but the actual management, very different teams.
And what are you seeing in the build-to-rent sector? Because there's a lot in the press about landlords exiting and mortgage rates going up. What are you seeing against it?
I think there's a seismic shift in buy-to-let investors wanting to get out, and institutional people wanting to get in. And I'm surprised how that shift has happened so quickly. And we look at the number of lost managed units, and over 80% of our lost managed units is people selling.
Right. And selling to owner occupiers.
A bit of a mixed bag, to be fair. But what we've found is, sometimes you will retain that management, but buy-to-let investors that are in the market now are people that don't own one property or two properties. They own a portfolio of properties which are normally managed by somebody else, that they're going to drop that into that. So whereas our build-to-rent portfolio's grown exponentially, our buy-to-let portfolio's flatlined for the last 3 years, and it's very difficult to grow that without sort of acquisition. And we've tried some acquisitions, and fuck me, it was a nightmare. So I was just never interested in doing that again, to be honest with you. Particularly at the size we could afford to buy, we were buying 300, 400, 500 units, and before you know it, you're down to 250, and it's
I've got a bit of experience in that one.
Is that why you're no longer partners in crime?
I think we fell out over that
one. Anyway, moving on.
You'd well to retain 50%.
I think something I'm interested to understand is, we've got a lot of experience managing urban blocks and tenant expectations, but does that change when the tenant is in a house? Because almost psychologically it feels different being in a house. It feels more like your home, your permanent home. So does that change how a tenant values the property itself? Like, is there less trashing of properties, less issues on checkout, and does it also change the expectations of the tenant and the experience that they have?
Exactly that. Nail on the head. It's exactly that, because if you're saying this can be your home forever, then you want people moving in to expect it to be their home forever. Not everyone stays there forever. We used to, again, one of the stats we used to look at is people moving out, and our largest percentage up until 18 months ago was people looking to buy. Now it's relocation for work. So it's just flipped, and it's literally flipped on its head. But you're right, because people treat it as their own. I mean, we did another sort of study on people with pets, because we're like, do we want to allow everyone on the estate to have pets? You find out people with pets actually look after the properties better than people that don't have pets, because they've got that level of responsibility. People with children have a level of responsibility. That means they look after the property better. I mean, I don't get too much involved in the student market, but I remember from back in the day when some students would just move out, and it's not because they want to treat the property badly, but they don't really understand. I'm just moving out, I'm going to leave all my shit there, and someone else is going to have to look after it. Whereas a family treats it very differently, but because of that, that washing machine's broken, it needs to be fixed next day. You know what I mean? And that is just, it's just a given. So it's challenging, but also rewarding at the same time. I mean, we track sort of spend on sort of turnover tenancies, and it's very low. I always, every time I look at the stat, I'm like, it's got to be more than that. But it's not.
I was going to ask what your average tenure is.
So we are over 3 years now on the build to rent. But if you, I think it's actually 3 years. I think it's about 32 months. But if you think we're constantly adding new units to that, which is dragging those levels down, it effectively is 3 years plus. And I think again, I think there was a recent study by Knight Frank again that said, our demographic is an older demographic than maybe you see in central Manchester. Those people stay longer in properties. It's just a given. You can't be bothered to move around all the time, can you? And I think people move around in the city centre, one, because of availability, which there's a lack of now. You've got the big university cities driving that traffic around. Once you're in your sort of home and you've got access to schools, you can drag your kid out of school to move, or it's where you live locally. So
do people want an extra level of security when they're taking the ASTs? So are you seeing longer ASTs for 1, 2, 3 years because of those reasons, because of being near a school? And
so to be honest with you, we've never gone on the journey of trying to push for longer ASTs, but people staying longer, as we track, we know people are definitely staying longer in this space without a shadow of a doubt. But it's more from a client point of view.
But you don't get that request.
Not as such, because I think it's an industry sort of understanding that people start for 12 months and then we'll see where we're after that, and all your staff are sort of trained and to speak in that way, and that's the terminology. But people are staying longer. But I think it's the client's perspective is and likewise for me, if I'm a landlord, you can have a 12-month tenancy, but let's see how it goes after that point, to be fair, and then maybe we'll do longer than that. But it's generally 12-month blocks. We've actually, on our biggest portfolio, flipped into just a periodic tenancy with a Section 13 sort of rent increase notice at month 12, because fundamentally as well, people want to tie people down to contracts, but if someone doesn't want to live there, do you really want them there? The demand is so high.
So what's your reasoning behind the periodic?
Because we would never, if someone come to us and said, I've just signed a new contract and I want to move out, we would let them move out. So from a process point of view, it's much easier for you to process an automated process that just goes, bang, here's your Section 13 notice, here's your rent increase, as opposed to having someone to sign a contract and all that nonsense. It's just easier.
Interesting.
The interesting thing for me is where does the suburban build to rent go, and where do the tenants go? And at the moment, like the ones you said there, the people that you've got for maybe 3 years, where are they moving on to? Are they moving on to buying a house?
So it used to be, we used to track that our biggest percentage used to be buying a house. Now it's relocation for work.
Yeah.
When I say relocation, it's 10 miles over where they currently live now. So that's the biggest sort of pull of people moving away. But we see, so we track churn in terms of, number of tenants moving over. We used to be at on one of the portfolios 25%, which is pretty normal. We're sort of down one of the portfolios 15% churn. I mean, people just aren't moving. People can't afford to move. Let's face facts. And also the lack of supply means where they're moving to. They're going to move to another one of our houses and pay more rent.
That's it. I think that's the thing that I'm interested to see is as the suburban build to rent sector evolves. There's a fairly limited stock of property which is lower to mid market, but then if there's suburban build to rent that comes available that's higher end of the market, is that tenant who's with you for 3 years in something that's mid-market then going to go, do you know what, I haven't got a goal to buy a house anymore, or I just simply can't afford it, so I'll move to a higher quality or better located or whatever build to rent property. And then where does it go from there? Does that then ultimately get to the point in their life cycle where they go, I'll go into senior living build to rent, because that's another subsector that is seeing a lot of traction.
Probably one I should be actually in, given my age. But no, I think that's an interesting point. We're going on a journey now with I've worked on a portfolio previously whereby they've done a refurbishment work on a select number of properties, up-spec them, and drove rents exponentially. It was 2 years ago, so the market was moving anyway. We're going on a similar journey with another portfolio of properties. We're going to prove the model with half a dozen units, but get the EPC rating to A, EV chargers, solar panels on the roof, all that side of things, really up-spec it. Is there a demand then for that aspirational tenant that thinks, do you know what, I'm just never going to fucking buy a property, not interested, it's out my head, but I want to live in a nice property, I want to live in the same box that my neighbours live in too. I believe there is. That model's yet to be. Of course there's got to be. As people, the one thing about owning your own home is that you can make your own homes. But I look at some of these properties and I'm like, if I was, early 30s, which I'm not, would I want to live in that product forever? Possibly not. So I agree with you. There's got what's next. You know what I mean? And then that senior living is.
We've talked about this before. We've talked about this before in earlier episodes, though. Is it a British culture thing? Do we see in Europe and across the world people do stay in rented accommodation for life cycle?
I know. I find it very, very sad that we were going to lose the aspiration to buy. I feel like if I, as I was growing up and working hard, wanted to buy my own place, that was a big thing for me, and. But I do think people just aren't that bothered anymore. And it's
just quality of life over
and convenience to relocate, because if you own your own property, you're trapped there. You've got a job somewhere else. You've got to wait for that to sell to get another one. So,
and I think the sort of the level of accommodation that's on offer will determine whether people actually do take a step back and say, I don't need to buy.
Exactly.
I was listening to another podcast where someone was saying, never buy a property. Invest your money elsewhere, and there's better returns. And when you look at it, the numbers, there are better returns than actually buying your own property. But I just don't want it to ever become a point in this country where people are strangled by the cost of rent and living, that there's no surplus cash for them to actually, one, live their life, and two, invest that money to make a better life for themselves. So that's the challenge we've got. But I do think I don't think we'll ever go to a Germany stage, but I do think less people will want to own their own home, because that's just a natural shift in where we're going.
I mean, the system's still set up to incentivise people to do that. You get the relief on capital gains on your principal residence, so there's still an incentive. The system still incentivises you to do that. So,
there's no incentive at the start of the journey anymore, so you've got lost that help to buy. So with all the incentives on the exit, there's incentive on the entry, and I think that's what will make make it, really unachievable for people, because who can save, 20, 30 grand? And also, I was reading something the other day, I think interest rates aren't going to come down to what I would think is, a perceivable normal level until well into 2025. So, that's years away. By that point, the people's mindset change in terms of like, I quite like I'm renting, I've got a great life, you know what I mean? It's just, I'm not asked about it. So, but it'd be interesting to see over the next few years. I think what happens in the space and the level of money that goes in and what's offering will determine whether that becomes a thing or not.
We'll get you back in 2025.
Yeah, exactly. I won't be at that point. One of these mornings anymore.
Absolutely. So I think just closing up, we talked about it there, but any thoughts on what's next for yourself, for the sector, kind of where things are going to go short term? Yeah,
I think short term, very little will happen this year. I think the usual people that we're working with are doing stuff and looking at deals, and I think house builders are maybe trying to get rid of some end of line stocks. I mean, we just did a deal with for Carlisle, which is 283 units, and just end of year stuff. So I think that will happen with house builders, but I think real capital pouring into this space, I don't think anyone's going to do too much this year. I think it'll be middle of next year when we see what interest rates are going to do. But there's a lot of people sat there wanting to deploy. The biggest challenge is delivery of stock. And I think, with all the will in the world, I still think we'll be sat here in 2025 going, there's loads of money here, guys, but we can't get the units out the ground. And I think it'll be a slower burner maybe than we think it's going to be, other than the usual suspects that are already in the space and buying up stock and have those relationships in it, and it's going, need more people like you building more houses.
Well, we won't be giving you the management.
Great, thanks.
What a note to end on. But no, it's been great having you in, and really fantastic insights. And on that point, it does remain a challenge to deliver. Build costs are still high, but we are seeing the market soften a little bit, but interest rates mean a challenge to deliver it. So, it is challenging.
Watch this space.
Watch this space. Let's talk about it in 2025.
If you're here or on a yacht. Or...
Well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for tuning in to the No Bullshit Property Podcast. If you like today's episode, please let us know on Instagram. Our handle is @sir_property, and drop us a DM. Let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear more of. You can also find the latest UK property news, downloadable industry guides, and much more to help you on your investment journey at sirproperty.co.uk. Thanks for listening.